The Moretti estate smelled of polish and old money, a world Eleanor now inhabited. Sunlight filtered through heavy brocade curtains, striping marble floors. She moved through echoing halls, her quiet steps barely disturbing the stillness. This quiet had become a constant companion. Eleanor often traced cold tapestries, finding solace in their woven stories. She made a life here with Vincent, a world of curated appearances and grand dinners. She tried to bring warmth to the opulent rooms, arranging fresh flowers, keeping fires bright. Her thoughts drifted to the quiet comfort of her small apartment before Vincent, a secret memory. Each morning she watched the perfect gardens, the beauty distant, untouchable, like Vincent. She smoothed her silk gown, seeking purpose for the day. Eleanor understood the house rules, playing her part with quiet dignity. She was Vincent Moretti's wife. That title was supposed to be enough. Today held a different weight. A high-stakes gathering was planned for the evening, an assembly of powerful figures from Vincent's network. A nervous energy hummed through the estate. Eleanor spent the morning overseeing preparations, her gentle voice ensuring every detail was perfect. She chose a deep emerald silk gown, hoping to project quiet strength and support for Vincent. As guests arrived, the estate transformed. Crystal clinked, conversations murmured, and booming laughs filled the foyer. The air grew thick with expensive cigars and fine spirits. Eleanor moved among them, a poised hostess, offering polite smiles. Her inner world felt separate from the glittering facade. She watched Vincent command the room, his charismatic presence drawing every eye. His sharp, cold gaze, usually for her, now gleamed with ambition, softened by a practiced smile. She saw the tension in his jaw, the pressure he carried, the power he craved. Later, during a lull, Eleanor overheard talk of a territorial dispute troubling Vincent for weeks. She had researched it, believing she could help. She saw an opening in the crowd around him and approached with a tentative smile. Her heart fluttered with apprehension and a desire to help. "Vincent," she began softly, "I was thinking about the Blackwood situation. Perhaps involving the shipping lanes through the old docks might offer leverage." She met his eyes, hoping for understanding. Vincent, mid-sentence with a scarred lieutenant, paused. His smile vanished, replaced by a cold stone gaze. A sudden chill crept up Eleanor's spine. She felt the men's silent judgment. "Eleanor," Vincent said, his voice smooth but with irritation, "this is not a topic for polite company, nor for your concern." His strong hand rested on the lieutenant's arm, blocking her. His cologne, usually comforting, now felt suffocating. A hot flush climbed her neck, humiliation washing over her. Her fingers tightened on her champagne glass. She wanted to disappear, but stubborn resilience held her. "I only meant to offer a thought," she said firmer now. "You mentioned the docks were a weak point." She met his cold gaze, a challenge in her emerald eyes. A muscle in his jaw twitched. His gaze hardened further, lips tightening. He gave a curt nod to his companions, ending the conversation. "My wife," he announced to the group, condescension in his tone, "has a delicate constitution. These matters are far too complex for her to grasp fully." He turned back to his lieutenant, erasing her from the space. The coldness in his eyes was absolute, a stark rejection. Eleanor stood for an agonizing moment as the party hummed around her, oblivious. She felt the men's glances, pity, amusement, indifference. Her champagne glass trembled. She took a slow, measured breath, shoulders straight, chin lifted. Turning, she melted into the crowd, the silk of her dress rustling. The sting of his words, the bitter taste of humiliation settled deep. She walked away, steps light, heart heavy, an outsider in her own home. Much later, with guests gone, the estate returned to silence. Eleanor was in the study, arranging financial reports on Vincent's desk. The door swung open. Vincent stood framed in the doorway, his imposing figure filling the space. Shadows deepened around him. His effortless charm was gone, his eyes cold and unforgiving. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing them in. Eleanor's heart lurched, her hands trembled, her throat dry. She turned to face him, hands clasped nervously. The silence stretched, fraught with unspoken accusations. She felt dread settling, a prelude to the confrontation she had hoped to avoid. "What was that, Eleanor?" Vincent's voice was low, dangerously quiet. He walked closer, his height casting a shadow over her. His anger, sharp and metallic, filled the air. She swallowed. I only thought to help, Vincent. I overheard them discussing the Blackwood problem. I know you've been worried. She lifted her chin, projecting a calm she did not feel. Her hands felt cold. Vincent let out a short, humorless laugh. He leaned on the desk, eyes boring into hers. Help? You call that help? You embarrassed me, Eleanor, in front of my associates, men whose respect I cultivate. His quiet voice held raw power, sending shivers down her spine. Her hands trembled harder. I never meant to embarrass you, she whispered, words catching. He saw her attempts to connect only as a flaw. An ache began in her chest. You always mean well, he said, pushing off the desk dismissively. But good intentions are a luxury I cannot afford. Not when I am building an empire. He paced slowly, radiating fury. Eleanor watched him. His words carried harsh judgment, a complete lack of understanding. He spoke of his ambition as if it demanded her subservience. She had tried to be the supportive wife, but it was never enough. The air felt thin, suffocating. I merely offered an observation, she ventured again, her voice gaining strength, defiance in her eyes. I have read about these things. I understand some complexities. She pushed, yearning for him to value her intellect. Vincent stopped pacing, facing her with disbelief and scorn. Understand? You understand nothing, Eleanor. You live in a gilded cage, protected from my world's harsh realities. You think books teach survival? His laugh was colder, chilling her. He moved to stand before her. You are a distraction, Eleanor. A beautiful, delicate distraction. But I need more than that. I need strength, ruthlessness, and iron will. Someone who understands the blood and sacrifice that comes with true power. He leaned closer, his whisper a physical assault. She felt his heat, contrasting his cold words. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of him. Her hands clenched, nails digging into her palms. Her silk dress felt a heavy burden. Her breath hitched, trying to hold back the pain. I have always tried to support you, Vincent, she said, her voice trembling. I have stood by you. I have tried to understand your world. Her words were a plea for him to see her. He shook his head, a look of pity in his eyes that cut deeper than anger. That is precisely the problem, Eleanor. You try. You try to fit into a world never meant for you. You are too soft, too naive, too fragile. A weakness I cannot afford for the future I am building. His gaze swept over her, a damning judgment. She felt herself shrinking. The room closed in, air too thin. Her vision blurred. His words were knives, twisting in the wound. Desolation, betrayal washed over her. All her sacrifices dissolved into nothingness. I do not belong in your world, she echoed, a raw whisper, confirming his judgment, yet holding a nascent resolve. Pain was immense, but something cold and sharp formed within her, a spark in the emptiness. Tears escaped, tracing hot paths down her cheeks, a searing reminder of her hurt. Vincent stepped back, his expression hardening. He glanced around the opulent study, symbols of his power. He met her gaze one last time, his eyes devoid of affection, no hint of the man she married. His voice, now emotionless, cut through the silence like ice. You don't belong in my world. With those cold words, he turned and walked away, his steps firm. The heavy door clicked shut. Eleanor stood utterly alone in the vast, echoing study. The scent of his cigar in his absence hung heavy, a cruel reminder of what was lost. She stood amidst the cold grandeur, shattered and desolate, tears flowing freely, hot rivers carving paths through her broken heart. The marble halls fell silent as the heavy oak door clicked shut. Vincent's footsteps faded, each sound deepening the wound of his cruel words. You don't belong in my world. The study's air, once holding his cologne, now felt empty, like a tomb. She stared at the space where he had stood, now vacant. Her hands, clammy and trembling, reached for an ornate velvet chair. Her knees threatened to buckle beneath her. She felt like a fragile doll, dropped and broken. A single tear burned a path down her cheek, betraying her usual composure. Soon hot tears streamed down her face. Her chest ached with profound sorrow. She had given him loyalty, quiet strength, and unwavering belief. She had pruned her true self trying to fit his precise ambition. For what? To be discarded like a trinket, unworthy of his expanding world. The bitter metallic taste filled her mouth. She stumbled through the cavernous rooms, tears blurring her vision. The Moretti estate's opulence now mocked their shared life. Chandeliers, priceless art, plush rugs all spoke of his power and her insignificance. She walked past their bedroom. The king-sized bed, once a place of intimacy, now felt irrevocably broken. A small, tarnished silver locket lay on her bedside table. Vincent had given it to her early in their courtship. His eyes had held a genuine warmth then, his touch tender. Her fingers closed around the cold metal, her knuckles whitening. Inside, a faded photograph showed a younger Eleanor, smiling shyly against a laughing Vincent. The image felt like a ghost, a relic from a life that never existed for him. Pain crushed her lungs, making each breath difficult. She sank onto the bed's edge, the silk comforter a luxurious prison. Here they had whispered promises, planned a future. Now it was a cold expanse, mocking her foolish belief. A choked sob tore at her throat. It was not just abandonment's sting, though sharp and immediate. It was the crushing realization of how deeply she had buried her true self. She had cultivated this unassuming persona, hoping for unconditional love. It had proven conditional. She had wanted him to love her, simply Eleanor, the woman without legacy. She wanted to know if he saw beyond wealth. He could not. Her experiment failed, leaving her exposed and bleeding. The next morning, a gray pall hung over the city, mirroring Eleanor's soul. She moved through the estate like a phantom, collecting only what mattered. A few cherished books, a worn sweater, the silver locket still in her hand. She left diamonds, gowns, and designer bags. They were tokens of a life she no longer recognized. They were gifts from a man who never truly saw her. The discreet staff moved with averted eyes. Their silence spoke of the drama. She offered a small, tired smile, a final gesture of grace. The drive to her modest loft apartment was a blur of city lights and a throbbing behind her temples. The contrast between the gilded cage and her simple sanctuary felt stark, yet welcomed. Her loft, in a quiet neighborhood, had always been her escape. Here, she shed the Moretti name's expectations and simply existed. It held stacks of books, abstract art, and a worn armchair by the window. From there, she glimpsed the city's unassuming rooftops. Stepping inside, the familiar scent of old paper and brewing tea offered small comfort. But even here, betrayal clung like a shroud. She placed the locket on the small wooden table, its tarnished silver dull in the soft light. The weight of it felt monumental, a symbol of everything lost. She shed her silk dress, a painful reminder of expectations, and pulled on a soft cotton nightgown. Her simple queen bed felt enormous and empty. She curled into a ball, drawing her knees to her chest, trying to disappear. Tears came again as slow drizzle seeping into her pillow. She lay for hours, perhaps days. The world hummed outside, the sun rising and setting unnoticed. Her body ached with weariness. Eyelids swollen, heavy. Food held no appeal. Water tasted like ash. She craved oblivion. Her mind replayed Vincent's words, his cold stare, his casual cruelty. "You don't belong in my world." A cutting remark meant to diminish her. Yet, in her profound grief, a tiny seed of defiance began to sprout. His world? He saw only surface power, influence ahead of him. He had no concept of the deep roots anchoring some legacies, roots far deeper than his concrete foundations. She had cultivated an ordinary life, academics, charity work, and secret management of family holdings. It was a self-imposed exile, a test if love could exist without power. She had genuinely fallen for the man she believed Vincent to be. She saw his fire, his drive. For a time, she believed affection could temper it. How foolish she had been. Days bled into nights. Her grief, stale and cloying, filled the apartment. She moved mechanically, a ghost in her own life, driven by deep exhaustion. But beneath the sorrow, a new emotion hardened, like ice over troubled water. A quiet, potent anger. Not fiery rage, but cold, calculating fury. He had broken her heart, insulted her being, her heritage, her quiet strength. He dared to define her, limit her, cast her aside. That Eleanor Vance knew was a great mistake. While Eleanor wrestled with betrayal in her loft, Vincent Moretti basked in his growing empire. He was oblivious to the change he had sparked in a woman he deemed irrelevant. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who believed himself unstoppable. His world expanded, consuming everything. He had just secured a new shipping route, taking control from a rival syndicate. His name was uttered with fear and grudging respect. "The Blackwood territories are ripe for the taking, boss," hissed Marco, his chief enforcer. They overlooked the city from Vincent's penthouse office. Silas is stretched thin after that last shipment went south. Vincent merely smirked, swirling amber liquid in his crystal glass. City lights glittered below. He saw himself as Power's weaver. "Let him squirm, Marco. A cornered rat makes for an easier kill." His sharp, cold eyes scanned the horizon. He built an empire brick by brick. No room for sentiment, no weakness. Eleanor had been a diversion, an adornment, a distraction. He shed her like old skin. He never thought of her nor the hidden power she represented. Her tears, her broken heart, were meaningless footnotes. Back in her loft, Eleanor slowly emerged from despair. Grief was a dull ache, but sorrow's sharp edges yielded to steely resolve. She looked in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes, still red-rimmed, held a new dangerous spark. The woman staring back was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, a Vance waiting. The realization offered cold, hard comfort. One gray afternoon, weeks after her retreat, a sharp knock rattled her door. Eleanor, startled, frowned. She rarely had unannounced visitors. Her hand went to the antique letter opener. Caution was a deeply ingrained instinct. She peered through the peephole. A tall, impeccably dressed man stood there. Older, perhaps 50, with kind but unreadable eyes, a silver beard. He held a flat, dark envelope. His formal presence exuded quiet, unsettling authority. Eleanor hesitated, her heart thrumming. She had spent a lifetime avoiding detection. Who was this man? "Miss Vance?" His calm, resonant voice carried through the door. "I have a message for you, urgent." Her surname from a stranger was a jolt. She rarely used it, preferring the anonymity of Mrs. Moretti, a name now branded with shame. Curiosity, overriding caution, made her unlatch the door. She left the security chain in place, cracking it open just enough to see his face. "Who are you?" Eleanor asked, her voice shaky, unused to speaking above a whisper. Her grip on the letter opener tightened. The man offered a polite smile. "My apologies, Miss Vance. My name is inconsequential. I am a courier. This message was entrusted only to you." He held out the dark envelope. Eleanor eyed the envelope. Thick, expensive paper, completely unaddressed. Its only mark was a small, embossed wax seal. Her breath hitched. A coiled serpent intertwined with a stylized V. The Vance family crest, ancient and unmistakable. Her mind flashed to childhood, to hushed conversations, to her father's study. This crest, rarely seen, was suddenly before her. Unease mixed with inevitability. This was not a message from Vincent's world. This was from her own, the one she had distanced herself from. She slowly reached out, fingers brushing the cool, crisp paper. The man released it, his mission complete. He gave a slight, deferential bow. "My instructions are fulfilled, Miss Vance," he stated, his eyes holding a knowing depth. "Await further communication." He turned and walked away, silent and swift, disappearing down the hallway. Eleanor stood frozen, the heavy envelope clutched, the door still ajar. She closed and locked the door. Her heart pounded with a different intensity. Not heartbreak's ache, but anticipation. A door creaking open to a forgotten past. She retreated to her living room, settling onto the sofa, the envelope heavy in her palm. The Vance family seal, familiar yet long absent, pulsed with hidden power. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. Wax crumbled, releasing a faint scent of old parchment and iron. Inside was a single folded sheet. Her eyes scanned the elegant script, vaguely recognized from childhood letters from an unseen guardian. The message was brief, precise, and cryptic. "Eleanor, the time has come. The world changes and you must claim your place. Proceed to the abandoned warehouse at Pier 7 at midnight on Friday. Ask for the watchman. He awaits you. Do not fail. No signature, no explanation. Just the stark command in the watchman. Pier 7, an old, disused waterfront section, was a dilapidated relic she had driven past countless times. Now it called to her. Her breath caught. The words hung, a challenge and a promise. A hidden past she had suppressed now clawed back. Vincent's betrayal, though raw, began to recede. A primal, powerful surge replaced it. Her blood called. Her legacy demanded its due. The silver locket, a symbol of lost love, seemed to dim. The world, she realized, was far larger, older, and more dangerous than Vincent Moretti could comprehend. Eleanor Vance was about to step into its heart. The narrow alley smelled of damp stone and forgotten dust, a stark contrast to the polished marble of Vincent's world. Eleanor clutched her worn handbag, her breath misting in the cold air as she stared at the weathered door. The address on the cryptic message had led her here, to a place that looked utterly abandoned, even hostile to anyone not seeking its secrets. A tiny, almost invisible symbol, a coiled serpent intertwined with a V, was etched faintly into the tarnished brass knocker. It was the same crest that had been on the letter, a design she vaguely remembered from an old family heirloom her mother once mentioned, then quickly dismissed as unimportant. A shiver traced its way down Eleanor's spine, unrelated to the cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of apprehension and a strange, desperate hope. She had spent the last 2 days in her quiet loft, the silver locket a cold weight in her palm, reliving every cutting word, every dismissive glance from Vincent. The shame had burned, a constant, ugly flame in her stomach. Part of her wanted to turn away, to retreat back into the familiar ache of her grief, but another, stronger part yearned for answers, for anything that could explain the sudden, brutal demolition of her carefully constructed life. She swallowed hard, the taste of stale fear bitter on her tongue, and pushed the heavy door open. A faint chime echoed from within, swallowed by the cavernous silence of a long, dimly lit corridor. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood, a fragrance that felt both ancient and profoundly comforting. Her eyes, still raw from unshed tears, struggled to adjust to the gloom. At the far end of the hall, a soft glow emanated from an open doorway, like a beacon in the encroaching shadows. Hesitantly, Eleanor stepped inside, the door creaking shut behind her with a soft thud that sealed her into the unknown. She found herself in a room that could have been plucked from another century. Towering bookshelves lined every wall, laden with leather-bound volumes that looked untouched for decades. A heavy mahogany desk dominated the center, covered in stacks of documents, a brass lamp casting a warm circle of light. Behind the desk sat a man, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit. His gaze, sharp and knowing, met hers with an intensity that made her instinctively draw back. This was not a random stranger. This was the watchman. "Eleanor," the man said, his voice calm and surprisingly gentle, yet carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "I am Arthur Finch. I have been expecting you." Eleanor's fingers instinctively tightened around the strap of her bag. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile this distinguished figure with the mysterious message. She had expected something clandestine, perhaps even dangerous, not a scene out of a forgotten library. A flicker of suspicion crossed her mind. Was this a trap? Another cruel joke at her expense? "Expecting me?" she managed, her voice a little hoarse. "How could you be? I don't know you." Arthur Finch offered a small, sad smile, a ripple across his otherwise composed features. He gestured to a worn velvet armchair opposite his desk. "Please sit. There is much to discuss and little time, I fear." Reluctantly, Eleanor sank into the chair. The velvet felt smooth beneath her fingertips, a soft luxury in this otherwise austere setting. She could feel the lingering warmth of the room, a subtle heat emanating from an unseen fireplace. Her gaze swept across the room again, trying to find some clue, some anchor in the whirlwind of her confusion. Nothing here made sense, yet everything felt strangely familiar, like a half-remembered dream. "My family," Arthur began, his voice a quiet murmur that held her captive. The Vance family has always operated with a degree of discretion. Your father, bless his soul, was a master of it. Eleanor flinched at the mention of her father. He had died when she was a young girl, leaving her with only hazy memories of a kind, distant man who always smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. Her mother had always spoken of him with a quiet reverence, but never in terms of grand legacies or hidden empires. My father? Eleanor questioned, her brow furrowing. He was a history professor, a quiet man. What does he have to do with this obscure address and messages? Arthur leaned forward, his hands resting on the desk, his eyes unwavering. Professor Vance was many things, Eleanor. His public persona was a deliberate choice, a meticulously crafted facade. Beneath that quiet life lay a legacy, an inheritance, that stretches back for centuries. Your family, my dear, is not merely wealthy. They are the architects of an empire, a conglomerate that has shaped the very foundations of the world's most powerful institutions from the shadows. Eleanor scoffed, a short, sharp sound that felt, well, alien in the hushed room. The idea was preposterous, insulting even, in the wake of her recent humiliation. Vincent, with his loud, brash displays of power, his newly acquired wealth, and his relentless ambition, had seemed like the epitome of the underworld. To suggest her quiet, academic father was part of something grander felt like a mockery. An empire? She repeated, her voice laced with bitter disbelief. Are you telling me my father, the man who spent his days in dusty university halls, was some kind of kingpin? That's absurd. Vincent would have known. Everyone knows the Morettis are rising. Arthur's gaze softened slightly, a hint of pity in his eyes. He understood her skepticism. He had seen it before in others, the sheer difficulty of comprehending the Vance family's true scope. Vincent Moretti, he stated calmly, is a minor player in a game he barely understands. His rising empire is a child's sandcastle compared to the deep, enduring structures your family has built over generations. The Vance conglomerate does not boast. It does not seek public recognition. Its power lies in its silence, its reach, its unparalleled ability to influence without ever being seen. Eleanor's mind reeled. The faint hum of an old clock on the mantelpiece filled the silence, its rhythmic tick-tock mocking the chaos in her head. She remembered Vincent's dismissive words, his certainty that she was weak, insignificant. Now this man, this watchman, was telling her she was part of something infinitely larger than Vincent could ever comprehend. The sheer scale of it was almost too much to process, a cruel joke her mind was playing on her. But my life, she stammered, running a hand through her hair. My mother, our home, it was ordinary. We weren't hidden away in some fortress. I went to school. I lived a normal life. Precisely, Arthur affirmed, a faint smile touching his lips. That was your father's greatest triumph, Eleanor. To give you a choice, to allow you to experience a life unburdened by the weight of your birthright. He believed you deserved to find happiness, free from the machinations of our world. He wanted you to choose it, should you ever need to. A sharp pang of pain shot through Eleanor. Happiness. She had thought she found it with Vincent, a fragile, fleeting joy that had shattered into a million pieces. The memory of his cold eyes, his cruel words, still stung, a fresh wound that refused to heal. She could feel the familiar burn behind her eyelids, threatening tears she refused to shed in front of this stranger. So what? She challenged, her voice rising slightly. He just left me to figure this out, to live in blissful ignorance while I married into a family that despises anything that isn't power? Arthur sighed, a soft, weary sound. Your father loved you deeply, Eleanor. He made provisions, extensive ones. I have been his confidant, his advisor, and indeed your family's guardian for many years. My role was to watch, to ensure your safety, and to wait for the moment you might need to claim what is truly yours. That moment, I believe, is now. He paused, letting his words sink in, allowing Eleanor to grapple with the seismic shift in her understanding of her entire life. She felt a strange dizziness, as if the floor beneath her had tilted. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as they gripped the armrests of the chair, It was an overwhelming torrent of information, a flood that threatened to drown her in its immensity. The Vance conglomerate controls vast networks, Arthur continued, his voice now a steady current of information. Far beyond the petty street wars and drug routes Vincent Moretti concerns himself with. We deal in information, in influence, in the subtle redirection of global economies. Our reach extends into the highest echelons of government, finance, and technology. We are not just crime lords, Eleanor. We are the silent partners of fate. Eleanor stared at him, her emerald eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. The cold, impersonal grandeur of the Moretti estate, the endless stream of shadowy figures who came and went, Vincent's almost desperate need for control. It all seemed so small, so provincial, compared to what Arthur was describing. Vincent thought he was building an empire. She now wondered if he was merely playing in a sandbox, oblivious to the vast, hidden oceans around him. Your father prepared for every eventuality, Arthur explained, his gaze unwavering. He understood the world, its dangers, and the inevitable call of your heritage. He knew one day you might need the strength of your family's name, not just for survival, but for purpose. Purpose. The word resonated deeply within Eleanor. For the past 2 days, she had felt utterly lost, adrift in a sea of grief and humiliation. Her purpose had been Vincent, her life woven into his. Now she felt a flicker, a tiny spark of something new. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. It was a cold resolve, born from the ashes of her shattered heart. Why now? She asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Why couldn't I have known this before? Before everything? Arthur's eyes held a deep sadness. Your father's instructions were clear. You were to be protected, to live freely until a time of dire need. Your recent circumstances, your abandonment, regrettably triggered a series of protocols. You are vulnerable, Eleanor, but you are also free. Free to choose your path, to claim your power, if you so desire. He watched her carefully, letting the implications settle. He saw the flicker of fire in her eyes, the tightening of her jaw. The quiet girl who had walked in, heartbroken and lost, was slowly, imperceptibly beginning to transform. The pain was still there, raw and aching, but now it was beginning to intertwine with something else. A growing sense of outrage, a dawning understanding of the monumental disrespect Vincent had shown her, unaware of the true giant he had casually cast aside. He thought I was weak, Eleanor murmured, almost to herself. He thought I was nothing. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, hollow and humorless. He had no idea, did he? No, Arthur confirmed, his voice firm. He had no idea. And that, my dear, was his gravest mistake. He reached into a drawer of the mahogany desk, his movements deliberate and unhurried. The soft creak of the wood seemed amplified in the quiet room. He retrieved a small, rectangular object, wrapped in a faded silk cloth. Carefully, he unwrapped it, revealing an ancient letter, yellowed with age, its edges slightly frayed. The paper felt thick, substantial, even from where Eleanor sat. Her gaze immediately fell upon the seal. It was a dark, almost black wax, perfectly preserved, and deeply impressed with the very same coiled serpent intertwined with a V that she had seen on the cryptic message and on the tarnished brass knocker of the door. It was unmistakable, ancient, and suddenly, profoundly real. The Vance family seal. Arthur placed the letter gently on the desk, sliding it across the polished surface towards her. This, Eleanor, is from your father. He foresaw this moment. He knew one day you would be ready. It contains the first steps towards understanding your true heritage and claiming your rightful birthright. Eleanor stared at the letter, her hand hovering over it. The paper seemed to thrum with a silent power, a connection to a past she never knew existed, a future she could barely conceive. Her heart pounded, no longer with apprehension, but with a strange, fierce anticipation. The pain of Vincent's betrayal still gnawed at her, but now a new emotion began to bloom in its place, a cold, hard determination. The wax seal, a coiled serpent intertwined with a stylized V, felt cool and brittle beneath Eleanor's trembling thumb. Arthur's words still echoed in her ears. a faint hum against the thumping of her own heart. He had urged her to claim her birthright, a concept so foreign it still felt like a dream. She traced the intricate symbol, a stark, ancient counterpart to the simple silver locket she still carried, hidden away. The paper, thick and aged, held the scent of forgotten cedar chests in quiet libraries. She pressed it to her nose, inhaling the past. Her fingers hesitated, lingering over the fold. Opening this letter felt like stepping across a chasm, leaving behind the woman Vincent had so cruelly discarded. There would be no turning back from whatever truths lay within these lines. A dull ache settled in her chest, a phantom limb of the love she had once nurtured for a man who saw her as nothing. The memory of his cold pronouncements, his dismissive glare, hardened her resolve. She pulled a delicate silver letter opener from her small desk drawer, a forgotten wedding gift, and slid it beneath the seal. The crisp crack of the breaking wax was a surprisingly loud sound in the quiet loft. The script inside was her father's, elegant and precise, yet imbued with a warmth she remembered from rare, cherished notes. His voice, or rather his essence, seemed to rise from the page, wrapping around her like a ghostly embrace. The ink had faded to a sepia tone over the years, a testament to the long wait for this moment. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began, drawing a sharp, involuntary gasp from her. He had called her that always, a private endearment. He wrote of a world she knew nothing about, a world he had shielded her from, believing it was too dangerous, too burdensome for a young girl. He spoke of the Vance name, not as a simple surname, but as a dynasty, a force that moved the unseen levers of global power. Her eyes scanned the elaborate paragraphs, each word a chisel chipping away at the foundations of her perceived reality. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and profound. The street sounds outside, usually a comforting backdrop, now seemed distant, irrelevant. Her father explained the hidden entrance, not as a place but as a series of instructions, a cryptic path woven into the very fabric of the old Vance estate. He described a specific painting in the main hall, a landscape she vaguely recalled from childhood visits. Behind it, he wrote, lay a mechanism, a sequence of almost forgotten movements. The letter detailed the precise pressure points, the subtle turns, the almost imperceptible clicks that would unlock a passage. He had drawn a small, precise diagram in the margin, his familiar hand now a guide to an unknown realm. He confessed his fears for her safety, his reasons for keeping her identity secret. The world of the Vance conglomerate was not one of gentle diplomacy or honest commerce. It was a realm of shadows, of quiet might, where empires were built and dismantled with a whispered word. He had wanted her to live a life untouched by its dark complexities, to find love unburdened by the weight of a legacy. A bitter laugh escaped Eleanor's lips, thin and sharp. Unburdened love. How cruelly ironic. The letter finished with a plea, a profound hope that she would embrace her destiny, that she would wield the power wisely for the good of the family name. It was not a command, but a heartfelt wish from a father who was no longer there to guide her. He had left her a map, a legacy, and a universe of responsibility. Eleanor lowered the letter, her hand shaking slightly. The ink had left a faint, almost metallic tang on her fingertips. The weight of her father's trust felt heavier than any grief. She had spent days mourning Vincent's betrayal, but now a new monumental task lay before her. The next morning, Eleanor stood before the main hall of the Vance estate. The house, usually silent and somewhat intimidating in its grandeur, now felt alive, brimming with secrets. She had driven here alone, leaving her small loft apartment behind, a stark contrast to the imposing structure before her. The air inside was cool, smelling faintly of old wood and beeswax. Sunlight streamed through tall, arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stillness. Her gaze found the painting her father had described, a vast, stormy seascape, its dark waves crashing against an unseen shore. She remembered it from her youth, a foreboding image she had always hurried past. Now it was a gateway. Her heart throbbed a steady rhythm against her ribs. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cold, ornate frame. The canvas felt rough, textured with age and layers of paint. Following the instructions from the letter, she pressed a specific point on the frame. near the lower right corner, where the sea foam met the rocks. Nothing. She tried again, applying a little more pressure. A faint click, almost imperceptible, echoed in the vast hall. Her breath hitched. She then slid her hand across the frame, finding a small, hidden indentation. She pushed it inward, then twisted it clockwise, just as her father had written. With a soft groan of ancient wood and metal, a section of the wall beside the painting began to recede, revealing a dark, narrow passage. A rush of cool, damp air flowed out, carrying the scent of rich earth and aged paper. It was a smell entirely unique, unlike anything she had ever encountered. Eleanor peered into the gloom. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, leading down into an unknown darkness. A shiver ran down her spine, not of fear, but of profound anticipation. This was it. This was the threshold. She took a deep breath, the scent of the archive filling her lungs. The silence of the passage was absolute, a profound quiet that swallowed sound. She stepped through, feeling the stone beneath her feet, cold and uneven. The passage led downwards, a series of rough-hewn stone steps spiraling into the earth. The air grew heavier, cooler, carrying with it a distinct, almost sweet aroma of old books and something metallic, like ancient ink. She walked deeper, the light from the hall fading behind her, swallowed by the winding tunnel. The only sound was the soft scuff of her shoes against the stone. Then a faint golden glow appeared ahead, beckoning her forward. She followed it, her senses heightened, every nerve alert. The passage opened into a vast chamber, an enormous space carved deep beneath the earth. The Vance family archive was not merely a room. It was a subterranean labyrinth, a sprawling network of private libraries, secure vaults, and secret passages. The air was thick with the scent of aged leather and parchment, a heady mix that spoke of centuries of accumulated knowledge. Soft, antique lamps, strategically placed, cast pools of warm light onto towering shelves that seemed to reach into an unseen ceiling. The sheer scale was breathtaking, overwhelming. Eleanor stood at the entrance, her mouth slightly agape. She ran a hand over a nearby wooden table, feeling the smooth, worn surface. The wood was dark, polished to a deep sheen. Dust motes danced in the lamplight, tiny galaxies swirling in the silence. Thousands upon thousands of books, ledgers, and documents lined the walls, stretching as far as her eye could see. This was not just a collection. It was a testament to enduring power and forgotten history. Her father's letter had guided her to a specific section, a vault within a vault, where the most sacred family artifacts were kept. She navigated the maze of shelves, her fingers tracing the spines of books, each one a whisper of the past. She found the section, marked by a faded, hand-carved V. A heavy iron-bound door stood before her, secured with an intricate lock. Her father's diagram had also included the combination, a series of twists and turns, clicks and pauses. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she manipulated the tumblers. The metallic scent intensified as she worked. A final, satisfying thunk echoed through the quiet chamber, and the heavy door swung inward with a low groan, revealing a smaller circular room, bathed in an even softer, more reverent light. At the center of this inner sanctum, on a pedestal of dark, polished stone, lay the Vance family seal. It was an ornate, heavy signet ring crafted from dark, polished silver, featuring the deeply carved family crest, the coiled serpent intertwined with the stylized V. It seemed to pulse with a quiet power, drawing her gaze, demanding attention. She reached for it, her fingers closing around the cold metal. The weight of it was surprising, substantial, a physical manifestation of centuries of influence. The silver was smooth, cool against her skin, yet the serpent seemed to writhe with a latent energy. Beside the seal, on a velvet cloth, lay a collection of aged, leather-bound legal documents and ledgers. Their covers were embossed with the same serpent in V. She picked one up, its pages brittle with time. The script inside was meticulous, detailing financial transactions that spanned continents, names of companies she recognized, and others she did not. The dates went back hundreds of years, tracing a lineage of power and wealth that dwarfed anything she could have imagined. This was not a modest inheritance. It was an empire. Eleanor spent the next few days in the archive, lost to the outside world. Sleep was an inconvenience, food an afterthought. She devoured the documents, her mind racing to connect the threads of history, finance, and influence. She learned of ventures in shipping and banking that quietly shaped global trade, of political movements subtly guided by Vance family interests, of rival syndicates that had risen and fallen while the Vance conglomerate remained a constant, unseen force. The scent of parchment, ink, and dust became her constant companion. The soft lamplight illuminated her relentless study. She found records of her great-great-grandfather, a shrewd strategist who had navigated the treacherous waters of the early industrial age, expanding the family's reach into new territories. She read about her grandmother, a formidable woman who had consolidated power and established a network of loyal, discreet agents across Europe. Each ledger, each letter, each coded message was a piece of a vast, intricate puzzle, revealing a hidden world of immense complexity and terrifying power. The Moretti organization, Vincent's burgeoning empire, seemed utterly insignificant in comparison. His brutal, overt displays of power were crude, almost childish, next to the Vance family's subtle, pervasive control. They did not conquer territories with violence. They absorbed them with influence, with information, with quiet, undeniable pressure. The realization settled deep within her, cold and absolute. Vincent was a small-time player in a pond, while her family owned the ocean. She found a personal journal of her father's, hidden within a false bottom of a larger ledger. His entries spoke of the burden of leadership, the constant vigilance required to maintain such an empire. He wrote of his love for her mother, and then for Eleanor, and his desire for her to be safe, truly safe, from the machinations of their world. He had hoped she would never need to step into the Vance legacy. A tear, hot and singular, tracked a path down her cheek. The irony of it burned. His protection had led her directly to Vincent, and to this. As she absorbed more, a profound shift began within her. The heartbroken wife, the woman discarded for being unfit, slowly receded, replaced by something sharper, something far more ancient and formidable. The pain of betrayal did not vanish, but it transformed, crystallizing into a cold, hard resolve. Vincent's words, "You don't belong in my world," now rang hollow, a pathetic echo of his ignorance. Her world was infinitely larger, older, and infinitely more dangerous than his. She saw the patterns, the interconnectedness of seemingly disparate events, the long game the Vance family had always played. Their power was not loud, but deep, like the silent currents of the ocean that shaped coastlines over millennia. She recognized her own intellect, honed by years of quiet observation and reading, was perfectly suited to this grand tapestry of strategy. The dry, musty air of the archive filled her with a sense of purpose. She lifted the Vance family seal again, letting its weight settle in her palm. The polished silver gleamed softly in the lamplight. The coiled serpent felt almost alive under her thumb, its scales intricate, ancient. The stylized V seemed to pulsate with a silent energy. This ring, this symbol, was the key to everything. It was not just an artifact, it was a declaration. Eleanor's emerald eyes, once clouded by sorrow, now held a deep, unwavering gaze. A cold, unyielding determination settled within them. She looked at the ancient crest, at the documents spread around her, at the quiet, powerful heart of her family's legacy. She understood now, fully and absolutely, the true scale of her power. The world would soon learn what happened when an ordinary woman was revealed to be a queen. The cool, aged metal of the Vance family seal pressed into Eleanor's palm, a tangible anchor in a world turned upside down. Its weight felt ancient, brimming with a power she was only just beginning to comprehend. Her emerald eyes, once clouded with tears, now held a steady, unwavering light, reflecting the soft glow of the antique lamps in the archive. A quiet hum of distant machinery echoed through the vast, vaulted space, a constant reminder of the unseen forces at play. This was not a dream. This was her birthright, stark and undeniable. Arthur Finch, ever the patient guide, stood by a tall mahogany desk, its surface covered in maps and ledgers. He observed her, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. He understood the monumental shift happening within her. the quiet storm brewing behind those deep green eyes. For days she had been a sponge, absorbing generations of history, the intricate web of global operations, the subtle dance of power and influence that defined the Vance conglomerate. The air, thick with the scent of old paper and leather, became her new classroom. The Vance name, Arthur began one afternoon, his voice calm yet resonating with authority, is not merely a name here, Eleanor. It is a philosophy, a network, a promise of order in a chaotic world. He traced a finger across a faded map, pointing to disparate locations across continents. Every line on this map represents a thread in our fabric, an investment, an alliance, a shadow of our reach. Eleanor listened, her mind racing, connecting dots she never knew existed. She saw the vastness, the sheer audacity of an empire built over centuries, discreetly controlling markets, influencing governments, and maintaining a delicate balance of power in the underworld. It made Vincent's burgeoning empire seem like a child's sandcastle by comparison. A bitter taste touched her tongue at the thought of his arrogance, his blindness. How could he have been so utterly wrong about her, about the world? She spent countless hours poring over financial reports, her fingers tracing columns of numbers that represented fortunes beyond imagination. The cold, logical flow of capital, the strategic investments, the almost artistic way resources were allocated globally, slowly etched themselves into her understanding. She had always possessed a keen intellect, a sharp mind for detail, but it had lain dormant, overshadowed by the domesticity she had embraced with Vincent. Now it was awakening, hungry, and precise. Arthur explained the intricate systems of communication, the coded messages, the protocols for intelligence gathering, and the unwritten laws that governed their vast network. He spoke of the men and women who served the Vance legacy, their unwavering loyalty forged over generations. They were not mere employees, they were an extended family, bound by honor and a shared purpose. Eleanor felt a deep, unexpected connection to these unseen loyalists. This was her family, her true inheritance, not just wealth but an entire world. Her demeanor began to shift, subtly at first. The soft lines around her eyes sharpened, her gaze grew more direct, more penetrating. Her voice, once gentle and hesitant, now carried a newfound weight, a quiet authority that commanded attention even in its softness. She found herself standing taller, moving with a deliberate grace that bespoke burgeoning confidence. The pain of Vincent's betrayal still lingered, a dull ache in her chest, but it no longer consumed her. Instead, it had become a fuel, a cold fire burning within. One evening, as the archive settled into a quiet hush, broken only by the rustle of turning pages, Eleanor asked Arthur about Vincent Moretti. His methods, she said, her voice steady, are crude, aren't they? Brash and short-sighted. Arthur nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. He sees the immediate gain, Eleanor. He understands power in its simplest, most brutal form. He lacks the vision, the patience, the understanding of interconnectedness that has sustained the Vance name for so long. He paused, then added, he is a storm, destructive and fleeting. You are the deep ocean, vast and enduring. Eleanor took a sip of the cool water on the desk, the smooth glass feeling solid in her hand. She thought of Vincent's opulent estate, his gaudy displays of wealth, his insatiable need for outward validation. He wanted to be seen as powerful. The Vance conglomerate, by contrast, thrived in the shadows, its true power unseen, its influence woven into the very fabric of global commerce and unspoken agreements. She understood now why her father had kept it hidden, why he had tried to shield her. The burden was immense, but so was the potential. Her days became a relentless pursuit of knowledge. She devoured historical texts detailing past conflicts, strategic maneuvers, and the quiet resolution of disputes that could have erupted into wars. She learned about key figures, their strengths and weaknesses, their loyalties and their prices. She absorbed the intricate language of finance, the nuances of international law, and the delicate art of negotiation. Her mind, once focused on creating a beautiful home, now mapped out global supply chains, financial markets, and the dark currents of the underworld. The more she learned, the clearer Vincent's vulnerabilities became. He had expanded too quickly, too greedily, leaving gaps in his defenses, overstretching his resources, and making alliances based on fleeting convenience rather than deep-seated loyalty. His arrogance had made him blind, his ambition a gaping wound. Eleanor saw it all with chilling clarity, like observing an insect caught in a spider's web. The web was not yet spun, but the threads were there, waiting for her to pull them tight. Her revenge would not be an act of passion, a vengeful outburst. It would be a calculated, meticulously executed strategy, a dismantling piece by piece until nothing remained. She would use the very qualities he had dismissed in her intellect, her patience, her quiet observation, as her deadliest weapons. The thought brought a cold sense of satisfaction that settled deep within her bones. Arthur presented her with detailed dossiers on Vincent's operations, his key lieutenants, and his most vulnerable points. She studied them, her brow furrowed in concentration, making annotations in a precise, elegant script. She identified his most crucial revenue streams, his dependencies, the weakest links in his chain of command. The Moretti organization, for all its bluster, was surprisingly fragile, built on a foundation of fear and opportunism. He relies heavily on his shipping routes through the Mediterranean, Eleanor noted one morning, tapping a specific location on a digital map projected onto the archive wall, and his financing largely flows through shell corporations in obscure island nations. Easy to track, harder to seize, but not impossible to disrupt. Arthur watched her, a flicker of pride in his eyes. Indeed, his pride lies in his speed, his aggression. He believes that by moving fast, he leaves no time for countermeasures. But speed often sacrifices precision and security, Eleanor countered, her voice calm and even. He makes too much noise. The Vance conglomerate operates in silence. She paused, her gaze distant, as if already seeing the complex choreography of her plan unfold. We will cut off his oxygen, Arthur. Slowly, systematically, until he gasps for air. The archive, once a place of somber history, now buzzed with a different kind of energy. Eleanor transformed it into a command center, a silent war room where her strategies took shape. She spoke with a quiet confidence that belied her years, issuing instructions to Arthur with the certainty of a seasoned commander. The delicate woman Vincent had abandoned was gone, replaced by someone formidable, a force of nature awakening to her true power. She walked through the Vance estate, no longer feeling like a guest or a student, but the rightful mistress. The ancient stones, the scent of polished wood, the portraits of her ancestors gazing down from the walls, they all affirmed her place. This legacy was hers to wield, a shield and a sword. Her pain had been acute, a sharp, searing wound, but it had cauterized, leaving behind a hard, unyielding resolve. She was no longer just Eleanor, the heartbroken wife. She was Eleanor Vance, the heiress, the strategist, the architect of her own destiny. Finally, the day came when she felt ready. She had absorbed enough, planned enough, understood enough. The time for learning was over. The time for action had arrived. She sat at the large, antique desk in the archive, the Vance family seal resting beside her hand. A heavy, intricate telephone, one of the secure lines Arthur had explained, sat before her. Its dark, polished surface gleamed under the soft lamplight. She picked up the receiver, the cool plastic of familiar weight. Her fingers moved purposefully, dialing a long, complex sequence of numbers. A series of clicks and hums resonated in the quiet room before a distant, almost imperceptible ringing began. She waited, her gaze steady, fixed on nothing in particular, yet seeing everything. The vastness of her empire, the intricate connections spanning oceans and continents, all ready to respond to her command. A voice, low and deferential, answered on the third ring. Vance Network, Secure Line 4. Identify. Eleanor's voice was clear, composed, devoid of any trace of emotion. It was the voice of command, of absolute authority. This is Eleanor Vance. Activate Protocol Chimera. Phase 1 begins now. A brief, almost imperceptible pause on the other end, then a sharp, concise reply. Understood, Madam Vance. Immediate activation confirmed. All resources mobilized across designated sectors. She hung up, the quiet click echoing in the suddenly silent room. The line was dead, But the network was alive, stirring, awakening to her will. A faint tremor ran through the floorboards, or perhaps it was just her own heart, now beating with a cold, thrilling purpose. Her calculated revenge had just begun. The scent of old paper and quiet power filled the air around Eleanor, a stark contrast to the sterile, echoing opulence of the Moretti estate she had once called home. Here, within the Vance family archive, the very atmosphere hummed with purpose. She sat at a grand, dark wood desk, not the flimsy thing Vincent had dismissed as her workspace, but one carved with history, its surface cool beneath her fingertips. A map of the world, illuminated by the soft glow of a single antique lamp, sprawled before her. Pinpoints of light marked strategic locations, each representing a node in Vincent's carefully constructed network, and each now a target. Eleanor's emerald eyes, no longer clouded by tears, scanned the intricate web, a blueprint of his ambition laid bare. Her voice, usually gentle, held a quiet command as she spoke into the small, sophisticated communicator at her ear. The shipment from Palermo, designated for the East Docks in 3 days. A beat of silence followed, the only sound the soft whir of the archive's hidden climate control. Delay it, not overtly, but enough to create a ripple effect. Misplace the manifests, reroute the vessel to a false port, something that appears to be a bureaucratic blunder, a simple human error. Her lips barely moved. She wasn't issuing an order. She was articulating a precise instruction, a delicate incision into the artery of his operation. The response was a clipped, affirming word, barely audible, then silence once more. Eleanor thought of Vincent's face etched with arrogance, as he had declared her unfit for his world. The memory still pricked, a dull ache beneath her ribs, but it fueled her now, transforming into a cold, focused resolve. This was not about mindless destruction. It was about strategic dismantling, an intricate game of chess where every piece moved with calculated intent. She would not just take what he had. She would strip it away, layer by agonizing layer, making him watch as his carefully built empire dissolved into dust. Her heart, once broken, now beat with a steady, relentless rhythm, each pulse a quiet affirmation of her power. In another part of the city, Vincent Moretti paced his polished office, the scent of expensive cigars and leather filling the space. The city lights twinkled far below, a shimmering testament to his dominion, yet a small, persistent irritation gnawed at him. His phone, a device usually reserved for urgent, high-level communications, had buzzed with a series of minor, perplexing disruptions. A shipment of untraceable microcomponents, vital for his burgeoning electronics black market, had vanished somewhere between the port of entry and his warehouses. Not seized, not robbed, but simply gone, like a wisp of smoke in the wind. His jaw was tight, his dark eyes narrowed in thought, though not yet in alarm. "Marcus!" he called out, his voice a low growl, the smooth edge of his usual charm replaced by a razor's sharpness. Marcus Thorne, Vincent's trusted lieutenant, a man whose loyalty was as unyielding as his granite-hard features, appeared in the doorway. "What is happening with the Palermo shipment? It's 3 days late and I'm getting conflicting reports from 2 different sources." Vincent ran a hand over his perfectly coiffed hair, a gesture of impatience. "One says a port strike, the other a faulty engine. Which is it?" Marcus, a man who rarely showed emotion, shifted his weight slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Neither, boss. We've had men on the ground. There's no strike, and the vessel passed all inspections." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It seems there was a mix-up in the paperwork, a clerical error at the shipping office. The manifest was swapped with another vessel, completely unrelated. It's headed for Vancouver." Vincent let out a short, humorless laugh. "Vancouver? Are you telling me a 6-figure consignment of high-value goods is now sailing towards Canada because some clerk can't read? This is amateur hour, Marcus." His irritation was palpable, a physical weight in the room. He slammed a fist lightly on his desk, the sound muffled by the rich mahogany. He dismissed it as an anomaly, a fluke in a system that usually ran with ruthless efficiency. His world was too vast, too powerful, for such petty issues to be anything more than isolated incidents. He prided himself on his control, his iron grip. Meanwhile, Eleanor's network hummed with quiet activity. She sat in a secure communication hub, a place far removed from the archive, where screens glowed with data streams. Arthur Finch, ever the calm anchor, stood beside her, his silver hair catching the ambient light. Vincent's financial pipeline to the Cyprus offshore accounts has been flagged, Arthur reported, his voice a low, steady murmur. A series of small, seemingly random transactions, just below the reporting threshold, designed to trigger an automated audit. Nothing illegal, of course, on our end, just enough to slow things down, raise a few eyebrows. Eleanor nodded, a small, almost imperceptible tilt of her head. The chill in the room seemed to deepen, but it was not from the air conditioning. It was the calculated coldness of her resolve. Good. We need to create friction, not outright collapse. Not yet. She watched the streams of data, the numbers and names blurring into a complex mosaic of influence and vulnerability. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, picked out patterns, weaknesses. She was learning Vincent's world from the inside out. Every crooked deal, every compromised official, every whispered secret. The information was a powerful weapon, more potent than any gun. She had spent weeks, almost a month, poring over the Vance conglomerate's vast intelligence reports, understanding the intricate dance of shadows and power. Arthur had been an invaluable guide, patiently explaining the nuances of covert operations, the subtle art of disruption. He had shown her how a seemingly insignificant detail could unravel an entire operation. Eleanor felt the weight of her family's legacy, not as a burden, but as a mantle of strength she was now fully capable of wearing. The pain of Vincent's betrayal still resided within her, a cold ember, but it no longer consumed her. It now fueled her precision, sharpening her focus. Vincent, in his grand office, felt a growing unease. The Palermo shipment was one thing, an irritating delay. But then came the financial hiccups. Transfers frozen, accounts temporarily suspended for unusual activity, minor delays in receiving payments from several international fronts. These were not catastrophic, but they were persistent, like sand in a well-oiled machine. He slammed his hand on the desk once more, the sound louder this time, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "This is becoming ridiculous," he muttered to himself, his voice tight. "First the components, then the Palermo cargo, now this financial nonsense. Is someone testing me?" He thought of Silas Blackwood, his longtime rival, but dismissed the idea. Blackwood was brute force, not subtle mischief. This felt different, almost clinical. Eleanor, meanwhile, was meticulously building her dossier on Vincent's inner circle. His most loyal men, their habits, their vices, their hidden fears. Marcus Thorne, Vincent's right hand, was a puzzle. Loyal to a fault, efficient, but somewhere every man had a weakness, a pressure point. Eleanor understood human nature, the intricate dance of desires and vulnerabilities. She knew that trust, once broken, shattered into irreparable pieces. Her intelligence operatives, silent and unseen, moved through the shadows of the city, gathering whispers, observing routines, piecing together the invisible threads that held Vincent's world together. The data flowed back to her, a constant stream, each piece a brushstroke in the larger painting of his downfall. The air in the secure hub was cool, the only sound the soft hum of electronics. Eleanor observed a live feed, her gaze fixed on Vincent's estate. She knew the layout of every room, the routine of every guard, the schedule of every delivery. She saw a flicker of movement in a window, a silhouette she recognized as Vincent's. A cold smile touched her lips, fleeting and almost imperceptible. He was a creature of habit, predictable in his arrogance, and that made him vulnerable. He believed himself untouchable, his kingdom impenetrable. He had underestimated her, and that was his gravest mistake. Days bled into a week, then another. The minor disruptions continued, like a relentless drip of water eroding stone. Vincent grew increasingly agitated. The subtle sabotage was costing him time, money, and most importantly, his reputation for flawless efficiency. He barked orders, demanding explanations, but his subordinates could offer none. The problems were disparate, seemingly unconnected, yet the effect was cumulative. His grip, he felt, was subtly loosening, like sand slipping through his fingers. He called his network, probing, asking, searching for an enemy, but found only shadows. Eleanor across town felt a strange detachment. The pain of betrayal had morphed into something harder, colder. She was no longer the heartbroken wife, but the architect of a silent war. The small locket, the one Vincent had given her, lay forgotten in a drawer in her modest loft. It held no meaning now, just a relic of a past life, a past self. The future was not about love or forgiveness. It was about balance, about consequence. Every delay, every lost penny, every frustrated sigh from Vincent was a vindication, a small, precise payment for the hurt he had inflicted. She imagined Vincent in his office, glowering at his subordinates, his expensive suits doing little to hide his mounting frustration. He would be searching for a grand enemy, a rival lord, never suspecting the quiet force he had so carelessly discarded. This was the beauty of her plan, to be invisible, to strike from the unseen, to make him doubt his own competence before he ever suspected her hand. The art of war, Arthur had explained, was not always an open confrontation, but in the slow, inevitable erosion of an opponent's will and resources. One evening, as the city lights began to prick the gathering dusk, Vincent sat at his desk, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. The silence of his opulent office was broken only by the low hum of the air conditioning. He felt a prickle of something he rarely experienced, genuine concern. The latest reports were deeply troubling. Another shipment, a truly critical one, had gone completely dark. Not merely delayed, but vanished. This was beyond bureaucratic errors or port strikes. This was organized, precise, and utterly untraceable. His knuckles were white as he gripped the glass. Just then, Marcus Thorne appeared in the doorway, his face paler than usual, a thin sheen of sweat on his brow. The man who never showed fear now radiated an unmistakable unease. He stepped into the room, his eyes meeting Vincent's, a silent communication passing between them. The atmosphere in the office, usually charged with Vincent's assertive authority, now crackled with a new unsettling tension. The very air felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken dread. "Boss," Marcus began, his voice rough, betraying the strain he felt. He rarely used that tone. "The shipment from Valletta, it's gone." He paused, and Vincent felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was not a minor setback. This was a direct hit. Completely. No trace. Our men on the ground, the informers, everyone. They found nothing. It's like it was intercepted by a ghost, an unknown, highly organized entity. The words hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement. Vincent Moretti paced his office, jaw aching from clenching it, the polished marble floor a cold reflection of his agitation. Another deal, another unexpected snag. His contacts for the Southern District Distribution Network, a lucrative territory, had gone silent. Their usual eagerness was replaced by an unsettling void. "Find out who is behind this, Marcus," Vincent growled into the phone, his knuckles white around the receiver. "I want names, I want faces, and I want them yesterday." Marcus Thorne, his most loyal lieutenant, sounded strained. "We are trying, boss. It is like they vanish into thin air. Every lead goes cold. It is unlike anything we have seen before." Vincent slammed his fist onto his mahogany desk, rattling the antique inkwell. Fear began to mix with the scent of his cologne. He built his empire on control, on knowing every threat. This unseen enemy was dismantling him with chilling precision. Paranoia crept up his spine, a sensation he had not felt since his street days. He tossed the phone onto the sofa. Who had the audacity? Who had the means? Silas Blackwood was a fool. No other player could pose such a threat. His mind raced, replaying every interaction, every casual conversation. Every face seemed to hold a hidden smirk. He needed air. Across town, in the quiet Vance family archive, Eleanor ran a gloved finger over an ancient map. The air smelled of aged paper and leather. Arthur Finch stood beside her, his silver hair gleaming under a desk lamp. He pointed to a region on the map. "This route," Arthur explained, "has been vital for the Moretti organization for 5 years. It connects their primary hubs to key buyers. Disrupting it completely would be inconvenient for them." Eleanor nodded, her emerald eyes sharp. Her heart beat with a steady rhythm. Vincent's world was a house of cards, and she was systematically plucking each one away. It brought a grim satisfaction. There was no barn, only the quiet resolve of a promise kept. She had promised he would regret his words. She intended to deliver. Inconvenient is a mild term, Arthur, Eleanor replied, her voice soft but firm. I want to sever it, make it irreparable for them. What assets do we have in that region? Who can we leverage? Arthur smiled in a faint upturn of his lips. Our assets are deep-seated, Eleanor. They have been in place for decades. We can activate the local chapter of the Green Hand Syndicate. Their leader, Thomas, owes the Vance family significant loyalty. Eleanor remembered the Green Hand from her father's ledgers, an independent group with an unshakable moral code. They despised the Morettis' ruthlessness. The faint click of Arthur's pen was the only sound for a moment. She tasted the metallic tang of ambition. Excellent, Eleanor said, a plan already forming. Instruct Thomas to make his move, publicly. I want Vincent's other partners to see the chaos. Let them question his power. Let the rumors begin. Days turned into a blur of calculated maneuvers. Vincent found himself increasingly isolated. A meeting with a powerful consortium of Asian crime families, a deal meant to solidify his international influence, was abruptly canceled. The official reason was a scheduling conflict, but Vincent felt the unspoken dismissal in the terse phone call. It chilled him to the bone. He paced his office again, anger suffocating him. He poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid doing little to quell the inferno within. He ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. Had he offended someone? But he was Vincent Moretti. His word was law. This could not be happening. His gaze fell upon a photograph, a younger Eleanor smiling shyly. A bitter laugh escaped him. The woman he had dismissed so easily. He had told her she did not belong in his world. He crushed the thought, focusing on the immediate threat. He needed to reassert his dominance. Marcus, I want surveillance on every single one of my partners, Vincent commanded, his voice tight with fury. Every call, every meeting. I want to know who is talking behind my back. Marcus Thorne, looking weary, reported back a few days later. Boss Old Man Johnson, your associate from the construction rackets, he pulled out of the Riverside Development Project. Said he had concerns about the Moretti organization's stability. The words hung heavy. Vincent's blood ran cold. Johnson was a rock, loyal for decades. Losing him was a significant blow to his standing. The soft whir of the office fans seemed to mock him. He felt the eyes on him, the whispers, the slow erosion of his authority. He tasted betrayal. Stability? Vincent scoffed, though the word felt hollow. What stability? We are stronger than ever. He tried to project confidence, but his hands trembled as he reached for a cigar. A deep doubt festered. This was not random. This was orchestrated. But by whom? Eleanor, meanwhile, sat in a quiet cafe, sipping herbal tea, her gaze fixed on a news report above the bar. Johnson Group withdraws from major city development. She allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction. The tea was warm, a stark contrast to the cold calculation in her mind. This was about precise dismantling. Her phone vibrated. It was Arthur. Johnson is out, he confirmed, his voice calm. The dominoes are falling, Eleanor. Vincent's reputation is taking a hit. His partners are nervous. Good, Eleanor stated. Nervousness breeds suspicion. Suspicion breeds disloyalty. His empire is built on fear. It will crumble from within. She watched the city outside, a vibrant tapestry unaware of the quiet war. She remembered Vincent's words, his sneering dismissal. You do not belong in my world. Her fingers tightened around the ceramic mug. If she let go, she would spill the hot liquid. He had judged her, underestimated her. Now he would pay. The memory brought a cold ache, a reminder of the naive woman she once was. A tear pricked her eye, quickly banished by her resolve. No room for sentimentality now. Back at the Moretti estate, the silence was deafening. Vincent sat alone in his private study, the heavy oak door closed. He had dismissed Marcus and his guards, needing to think. He felt utterly exposed, vulnerable in a way he had never experienced. His paranoia had become a suffocating blanket. His phone buzzed, startling him. It was an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Moretti. A distorted, altered voice spoke, devoid of inflection. Your house is not as secure as you believe, Vincent. And your friends? They are no longer your friends. The line went dead. Vincent stared at the phone, his blood turning to ice. The ringing silence amplified the words. He sprang up, scanning the room frantically. Nothing seemed out of place, yet the message was clear. Someone had been inside his private sanctum. He felt a primal terror, a cold dread seizing his throat. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He paced again, did again, breath ragged. Who knew about his house, his partners? Only a handful. None would betray him. Or would they? His mind spiraled, suspicion latching onto every familiar face. Marcus? Impossible. His father's old consigliere? Too loyal. The thought was maddening. The next morning, Vincent found a small, unmarked envelope on his desk, placed precisely in the center. He had been the first to enter his office, but it had not been there the night before. His heart hammered. He felt the slick, cold fear return. He picked up the envelope, fingers trembling. The paper felt thick. There was no address, just his name, printed in elegant script. He tore open the seal, his movements jerky. Inside lay a single playing card, the Queen of Spades. The regal queen stared back, her face impassive. The card felt thicker than a standard deck. He turned it over. Etched into the back, with an almost imperceptible delicacy, were two words. Remember me. Vincent's vision blurred. The Queen of Spades. The card seemed to pulse in his hand, a chilling beat. He remembered the symbolism, betrayal, loss, a powerful woman with a dark past. But the words, remember me, they echoed in his mind. A profound coldness filled the room. The sharp scent of the card, mixed with his own fear, filled his nostrils. He knew that script. It was a familiar, elegant hand he had once admired. A face long banished flashed before his eyes. Eleanor. Her emerald eyes, her quiet strength he had mistaken for weakness. The realization hit him like a physical blow, a brutal clarity that left him gasping. His downfall was being orchestrated by someone he knew, someone he had discarded. The Queen of Spades lay on Vincent's mahogany desk, its stark image a cruel whisper in the silent, opulent room. He picked it up, tracing the cold, smooth lines of the card with his thumb, a vein throbbing faintly in his temple. The scent of aged wood polish and expensive leather filled the air, a familiar comfort that now felt tainted by a creeping unease. He had crushed rivals before, but never had one dared such a blatant, almost theatrical insult. The message was clear. Someone was playing a game, and Vincent Moretti hated being played. His eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, narrowed into glinting slits as he searched for an answer, for a face to attach to this growing tide of insolence. Eleanor was a ghost to him, a fading memory of a woman he had discarded, too insignificant to warrant even a fleeting thought in his current turmoil. His mind cycled through his known enemies, ticking off names, evaluating their capacity for such cunning. Each recent setback, from the hijacked shipment to the suddenly cold shoulders of his business partners, felt like a deliberate provocation. The world seemed to be closing in, its whispers turning into outright taunts, and his pride stung with each perceived slight. He ran a hand over his perfectly coiffed hair, the gesture doing little to soothe the growing irritation that prickled beneath his skin. This was not how Vincent Moretti operated. He was the one who inflicted the pain, not received it. His gaze finally settled on Silas Blackwood, a long-standing rival whose crude ambitions often clashed with Vincent's more refined, if equally ruthless, methods. Blackwood was brute force, a snarling dog, but he also harbored a deep, festering resentment. The Queen of Spades seemed like a gesture Blackwood might relish, a blunt, in-your-face challenge. A slow, dangerous heat began to simmer in Vincent's gut. Yes, he thought, it had to be Blackwood. The pieces clicked into place, neatly, perfectly, even if they were the wrong pieces. From her vantage point, a quiet corner booth in a bustling downtown cafe, Eleanor watched the city pulse with a detached calm. The scent of rich coffee and warm pastries hung in the air, a stark contrast to the coiled tension within her. A newspaper lay open before her, a small, inconspicuous article on page 3 detailing an unexplained fire at a shipping warehouse known to supply Moretti's operation. She took a slow sip of her tea, the warm ceramic cup a steadying presence in her hands. Arthur Finch sat opposite her, his silver hair catching the morning light, his expression unreadable. The fire was quite convincing, Arthur observed, his voice a low rumble. Moretti's people are already blaming Blackwood's crew for a territorial dispute. Eleanor merely nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible curve playing on her lips. He needs a tangible enemy, she replied, her voice soft yet precise. Someone he can understand. Someone he can hit. Her emerald eyes held a glint of steel, reflecting the calculated architect of this unfolding drama. She had learned to anticipate Vincent's reactions, to predict the predictable arrogance that clouded his judgment. The thought of him, blinded by his own hubris, targeting the wrong foe brought a cold satisfaction that settled deep in her bones. This was not personal. This was strategy. Back at the Moretti estate, the air crackled with a palpable tension. Vincent had called an emergency meeting of his inner circle. Marcus Thorne, his usually stoic lieutenant, stood rigid, his face grim. The heavy oak doors to Vincent's private study remained shut, a barrier against the mounting anxiety outside. Inside, the scent of expensive cigar smoke mingled with the sharp tang of unease. Vincent paced before his men, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Blackwood is testing us," he declared, his fist slamming down onto the polished surface of his desk. The wood shuddered under the impact. "He thinks we're weak. He thinks we're distracted." He held up a recent intelligence report, a document carefully crafted by Eleanor's network and subtly leaked to Moretti's men. It detailed a supposed surge in Blackwood's illicit activities in a contested district, a blatant fabrication designed to inflame Vincent's ego. The words on the page were a fuse, and Vincent's pride was the spark. He remembered the Queen of Spades, its image now searing into his mind, reinforcing the convenient narrative. "This is not distraction, Vincent," he told himself. "This is war." His men exchanged nervous glances, sensing the shift from mere frustration to outright belligerence. The following days saw a dramatic escalation. Moretti's black cars, sleek and menacing, began appearing with greater frequency near Blackwood's established territories. Surveillance, once discreet, became an overt show of force. The streets, usually humming with the city's indifferent rhythm, now held an underlying tremor of anticipation. One evening, a small Moretti crew, acting on a tip that had originated from Eleanor's intelligence, attempted to disrupt a minor Blackwood gambling operation. The encounter was messy, a brief, violent skirmish in a darkened alleyway, ending with a few broken bones and a clear message. The truce was over. The sharp smell of fear and adrenaline lingered in the crisp night air. Eleanor received the reports through Arthur, a steady stream of information flowing into the Vance family archive, each detail a testament to her precise orchestration. She sat amidst ancient maps and ledgers, the faint aroma of old paper and leather enveloping her, a silent observer of the chaos she had unleashed. Her fingers moved gracefully over the smooth, cool surface of a touch-screen tablet, correlating data, adjusting parameters. She felt no rush, no frantic energy. Her planning was meticulous, her execution flawless. Vincent's impulsive actions were merely pieces on her chessboard. Arthur, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. "It seems almost too easy, Eleanor," he mused, his voice laced with caution. "He falls for every bait." Eleanor looked up, her emerald eyes unwavering. "Arrogance is a powerful blindfold, Arthur," she stated, her voice quiet but firm. "He chose to see what he expected to see. He chose to believe what his pride dictated." The subtle manipulation had been her greatest weapon, planting seeds of suspicion that blossomed into full-blown certainty within Vincent's mind. She knew the map of his ego intimately, every crack, every weakness, every predictable turn. Reports of retaliatory moves from Blackwood's side began to filter in. A Moretti-owned liquor warehouse had been vandalized. Its contents spilled across the floor, leaving the sweet, sickly scent of fermenting alcohol to fester in the morning sun. A delivery truck, emblazoned with Moretti's discreet emblem, had been set ablaze on a lonely stretch of road, its metal shell still smoking hours later. These incidents, though minor in the grand scheme of things, chipped away at Vincent's sense of control, fueling his fury. Each act of defiance, real or imagined, pushed him further towards the edge. The cold, hard truth was that Blackwood, though surprised by the sudden aggression, was not one to back down from a fight. Vincent's paranoia festered, turning his once sharp focus into a distorted mirror, reflecting only Blackwood's perceived treachery. He saw Blackwood's hand in every shadow, his sneering face in every setback. The constant, low-level harassment from both sides had become unbearable. His sleep was fitful, haunted by images of disrespect and betrayal. The opulent Moretti estate, once a symbol of his power, now felt like a gilded cage, its walls echoing with the unspoken tension that permeated every corner. He walked through its vast halls, the silence amplifying the thumping rage in his chest. One morning, after a particularly brazen attack on one of his protection rackets, Vincent reached his breaking point. The news had come through Marcus Thorne, whose face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and growing resentment. "They hit the O'Malley's, boss," Thorne reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Blackwood's men left a message, said it was for the warehouse fire." Vincent stood by the tall, arched window of his study, gazing out at the manicured lawns. The crisp autumn air offered no solace. He gripped the heavy velvet curtains, his knuckles white. The rage, simmering for weeks, finally erupted, a volcanic force consuming his every thought. He heard the echoes of his own dismissive words to Eleanor, those arrogant pronouncements that she did not belong in his world. He remembered the Queen of Spades, its chilling implication. The feeling of being toyed with, of being disrespected by a rival he deemed beneath him, was intolerable. He had to reassert dominance. He had to make an example. He turned from the window, his expression a mask of cold, unyielding fury. His eyes held no trace of doubt, only the burning conviction of a man wronged. "Get everyone," he commanded Marcus, his voice low and vibrating with dangerous intent. "Every last man we have. I want them ready by midnight." Marcus stared, then nodded, a shudder running through his frame. The scent of burnt sugar from the morning's coffee, usually comforting, now seemed to curdle in the room. Vincent's jaw was set, his breathing shallow. He saw Blackwood's face in his mind, sneering, victorious, and the image drove him to a decision born of fatal misjudgment. "We hit Blackwood," he declared, the words hanging heavy in the air, a death knell in the silence. "Full scale, preemptive. We end this now." He was consumed by rage and perceived betrayal, ordering a full-scale, preemptive strike against Silas Blackwood's operations, entirely unaware he was playing directly into Eleanor's meticulously laid trap. The crystal chandeliers in the grand ballroom of the Harrington Hotel shimmered like frozen waterfalls, casting a dazzling sterile light over the city's elite. Vincent Moretti moved through the throng, a dark, tailored suit, a stark contrast to the sparkling gowns and polished smiles around him. The air hummed with hushed conversations and the clinking of champagne flutes, a deceptive calm that did little to soothe the coiled tension in his gut. Blackwood's audacity still burned, a festering wound beneath his veneer of composure. He was here to project unwavering strength, to show the world that Moretti stood firm, despite the recent inexplicable disturbances to his operations. His eyes scanned the room, searching for faces of influence, for the one man whose signature would solidify his latest acquisition, expanding his empire further into the lucrative shipping lanes. Then, across the sprawling marble floor, she appeared. A collective hush seemed to fall in her immediate vicinity, a subtle ripple through the otherwise constant murmur of the gala. She moved with an effortless grace, her gown a deep emerald, catching the light as if woven from liquid moonlight. Her hair, usually simply styled, was swept up in an elegant cascade, framing a face that was both utterly familiar and completely new. Her emerald eyes, though, held the true transformation. They were no longer the soft, sometimes shadowed pools he remembered. Instead, they gleamed with a cool, unyielding fire, radiating an undeniable aura of power that silenced casual chatter in her wake. Vincent stopped, a champagne glass halfway to his lips. His breath hitched, a faint, unwelcome tremor running down his spine. The woman was breathtaking, an absolute vision, yet something about her twisted his stomach into a knot. He knew those eyes, he knew that regal bearing, but it could not be her. The woman he had cast aside was fragile, easily broken, a quiet shadow in his opulent world. This woman was a supernova, burning with an inner light that commanded attention, respect, even fear. No, it was simply an uncanny resemblance, a trick of the light, a figment of a memory he had long since buried under layers of ambition and disdain. He scoffed internally, forcing his gaze away, dismissing the unsettling echo in his mind. He reminded himself of his purpose here tonight. Mr. Harrison, the shipping magnate, awaited his final offer. This deal was crucial, a statement of dominance. Vincent pushed past a cluster of laughing socialites, his focus narrowing on the portly figure of Harrison, who was currently deep in conversation near a sprawling ice sculpture. Vincent approached, a practiced smile easing onto his face, his hand extended. "Mr. Harrison, a pleasure as always," he greeted, his voice smooth, confident. Harrison's smile, usually expansive, seemed oddly restrained. "Moretti," he responded, his eyes flicking nervously towards a distant corner of the room. Vincent followed his gaze. The Emerald Woman stood there, now engaged in a quiet, intense conversation with two other influential figures. She gestured subtly, a delicate hand moving with authority, and the men around her nodded, their expressions deferential. A wave of irritation washed over Vincent. Who was this woman, stealing the focus from him? The air around her seemed to crackle with an unseen energy. He pulled his attention back to Harrison, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I trust you have had time to consider our proposal for the Pacific routes," Vincent pressed, trying to regain control of the conversation. He had spent weeks orchestrating this, leveraging every contact, every threat to corner the market. This deal was practically sealed. Harrison cleared his throat, his gaze still darting back to the Emerald Woman. "Moretti, about that," he began, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "There has been a new development." His words felt like a physical blow. Vincent's confidence wavered, a cold premonition creeping into his thoughts. "New development," he echoed, his voice sharper than intended. Just then, the Emerald Woman turned, her gaze sweeping across the room. For a split second, her eyes met Vincent's. There was no recognition, no emotion he could decipher, only a cool, assessing glance that seemed to pierce through his carefully constructed facade. Then she smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of her lips that held a devastating intelligence, a hint of something ancient and knowing. She looked away, her conversation resuming, but the impact of that fleeting glance lingered, a phantom touch on his soul. Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "Indeed, a rather compelling new proposal has come across my desk." He took a sip of his champagne, avoiding Vincent's increasingly intense stare. "From the Vance conglomerate." The name hung in the air, a bell tolling a slow, mournful rhythm in the cavernous ballroom. Eleanor. Vance. The world spun for Vincent, the opulent room tilting on its axis. Eleanor. His wife. No, his ex-wife. The woman he had dismissed, humiliated, told she did not belong in his world. It was impossible. His mind scrambled, searching for logical explanations, for a way to dismiss this cruel twist of fate. It had to be a different Eleanor. There were many Eleanors. Vance was a powerful name, but it couldn't be her. Not his quiet, unassuming Eleanor, but the eyes, the regal bearing, the quiet, devastating intelligence that had pierced through him moments ago. A cold sweat broke out on his brow, despite the air-conditioned comfort of the room. He remembered the simple locket, the way her hand trembled when he told her she was a weakness. This woman held no weakness. This woman was strength, distilled and refined into pure, unyielding power. He strode purposefully towards Harrison, his voice low and dangerous. "Who was their representative?" he demanded, ignoring the curious glances from passers-by. "Give me a name." Harrison hesitated, then sighed. She introduced herself as Eleanor Vance. The name hung in the air, a bell tolling a slow, mournful rhythm in the cavernous ballroom. Eleanor Vance, the world spun for Vincent, the opulent room tilting on its axis. Eleanor, his wife. No, his ex-wife. The woman he had dismissed, humiliated, told she did not belong in his world. It was impossible. His mind scrambled, searching for logical explanations, for a way to dismiss this cruel twist of fate. It had to be a different Eleanor. There were many Eleanors. Vance was a powerful name, but it couldn't be her. Not his quiet, unassuming Eleanor. But the eyes, the regal bearing, the quiet, devastating intelligence that had pierced through him moments ago. A cold sweat broke out on his brow, despite the air-conditioned comfort of the room. He remembered the simple locket, the way her hand trembled when he told her she was a weakness. This woman held no weakness. This woman was strength, distilled and refined into pure, unyielding power. He saw her again, at the double doors, a final elegant turn of her head, her emerald eyes meeting his one last time. There was still no overt recognition, no malice, only that cool, assessing gaze, now tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible satisfaction. Then she was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of an expensive, unfamiliar perfume and the shattered remnants of his meticulously planned deal. Vincent stood frozen, the sound of the gala suddenly deafening. The vibrant chatter, the clinking glasses, the soft music, it all assaulted his senses. Harrison's voice was a distant hum, something about apologies and future opportunities. But Vincent heard none of it. His eyes were fixed on the empty doorway where Eleanor had vanished. The weight of his loss settled heavily upon him. Not just the loss deal, but a deeper, more unsettling dread. He had felt it before, a strange, creeping unease each time his plans were derailed, each time an unknown force had struck at his operations. The Queen of Spades' message, the intercepted shipments, the wavering loyalty of his allies. All of it, his mind reeled, trying to connect the pieces, trying desperately to reconcile the elegant, powerful woman who had just walked away with the meek, heartbroken wife he had discarded. The disparity was too vast, the transformation too profound. His pride screamed that it was impossible, that she was incapable of such a feat, such a deception. Yet the unease gnawed at him, a persistent, icy finger tracing patterns of doubt on his soul. He had looked into her eyes, those same emerald eyes that once pleaded with him, now held an authority he had never seen before. A familiar face, yes, but one carved by an entirely different hand, imbued with a spirit he had fatally underestimated. As Vincent watched his deal collapse and Eleanor glided away, a flicker of uneasy recognition passed through his eyes, a seed of doubt planted by her familiar, yet utterly changed presence. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind Vincent Moretti, muffling the distant city sounds. Dust motes danced in the muted light filtering through the tall, leaded glass windows of Arthur Finch's private study, settling on rows of leather-bound books. Vincent's jaw was clenched tight, a knot of frustration pulling at his gut. He had just witnessed Eleanor, his discarded wife, glide through a high society gala like a queen, and then effortlessly snatch a lucrative deal right from under his nose. The memory burned. He paced the rich Persian rug, his expensive Italian loafers sinking slightly with each agitated step. Arthur Finch sat behind his imposing desk, a quiet, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He poured amber liquid into 2 crystal tumblers, the clinking sound unnerving Vincent further. The older man's eyes, deep and knowing, followed Vincent's every restless movement. Vincent could feel the weight of those eyes, assessing him, judging him. "You wanted to see me, Vincent." Arthur's voice was calm, almost a murmur, contrasting sharply with the turmoil raging inside Vincent. He stopped, slamming a fist lightly on the desk, the crystal tumblers rattling. His composure, usually ironclad, was fraying at the edges. The public humiliation, the steady erosion of his power, it was all becoming too much to bear. He needed answers. He needed to understand who dared challenge him in this way. "Who is she, Arthur?" Vincent demanded, his voice low and dangerous. He leaned forward, hands braced on the polished wood. "This new player, this woman who moves like a ghost and strikes like a viper. She appeared from nowhere, and now my deals are crumbling. My alliances are fracturing. My world is being systematically picked apart, piece by piece, and she was there at the gala, orchestrating it all." He paused, searching Arthur's unreadable face. "You know everyone, Arthur. Tell me her name." Arthur took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving Vincent's face. A long moment of silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Vincent's patience was wearing thin, his ambition fueled by a desperate need to reclaim control. He felt a chill creep up his spine. This was not the typical, straightforward conversation he usually had with Arthur, a man who always provided precise, if sometimes unwelcome, counsel. "Her name is Eleanor Vance, Vincent," Arthur finally said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. He placed his glass carefully on a coaster. "And she is no new player. She is the oldest player." Vincent scoffed, a humorless sound. "Vance, never heard of them. Some upstart syndicate trying to make a name for themselves, no doubt. I'll crush them." He dismissed the name with a wave of his hand, already planning his counterattack, his mind racing through potential strategies to dismantle this unknown threat. He was Vincent Moretti, and no one, especially not some shadowy Vance organization, would stand in his way. Arthur sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "You truly do not see, do you, Vincent? Your arrogance blinds you even now. That woman at the gala, the one who stole your deal, the one who has been unraveling your carefully constructed empire, that was your wife." The words hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. Vincent felt a cold shock, like a bucket of icy water had been thrown over him. His breath caught in his throat. His wife? Impossible. Eleanor was quiet, unassuming, the woman he had dismissed as weak, telling her she did not belong in his world. He remembered her emerald eyes, wide and filled with a pain he had barely registered then. He remembered the simple silver locket, a forgotten symbol of a love he had deemed insignificant. "My wife?" Vincent repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He laughed, a short, sharp bark that held no humor. "Eleanor? That's absurd. She is a docile house cat, Arthur. A fragile ornament. She couldn't organize a tea party, let alone dismantle my operations across 3 continents. You're playing games." His mind rejected the notion, desperately clinging to the image of the submissive woman he had so casually discarded. The thought was too preposterous, too humiliating to be true. Arthur merely raised an eyebrow, his expression unwavering. He leaned back in his chair, a faint scent of aged parchment filling the air. "Did you ever truly see her, Vincent? Or did you only ever see what you wanted to see? A reflection of your own inflated ego, perhaps?" The words were a subtle sting, landing with precision. Vincent felt a flicker of unease, a tiny crack appearing in his hardened facade. The image of Eleanor at the gala, so composed, so powerful, suddenly flooded his mind with terrifying clarity. "Eleanor Vance is the sole heiress to the Vance conglomerate," Arthur continued, his voice now carrying a quiet authority that brooked no argument. "An empire that predates your Moretti family by centuries. An organization so vast, so deeply entrenched, that its true scope is rarely glimpsed by those outside its inner circle. They do not seek fanfare, Vincent. They seek control. Quiet, absolute control." Vincent staggered back, bumping into a heavy leather armchair. He felt a sudden dizziness, the room seeming to tilt around him. The Vance conglomerate. He had heard whispers of it, a myth almost, a name spoken in hushed tones by the oldest, most powerful figures in the underworld. He had always dismissed it as old wives' tales, exaggerations of a bygone era. He, Vincent Moretti, was the future. He was the one building the next great empire. "The Vance family," Arthur elaborated, his voice now a measured history lesson, "has always operated from the shadows. Their influence spans finance, technology, logistics, even governments. Your meager drug routes and protection rackets, Vincent, are child's play compared to their global reach. They own the very infrastructure you operate within, the banks that hold your illicit gains, the ports where your shipments arrive, the communications networks you use to coordinate." The realization hit Vincent like a physical blow. The intercepted shipments, the disrupted communications, the sudden freezing of his offshore accounts, the unexpected legal hurdles that had plagued his recent deals. It all started to make a horrifying kind of sense. He had attributed it to random bad luck, or the machinations of Silas Blackwood. A rival he now understood was merely a pawn in a far grander game. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "She was testing you, Vincent," Arthur stated, his gaze piercing. "She lived a quiet life, sought genuine connection, a love untainted by her power or your ambition. She wanted to see if you could truly love Eleanor, the woman, not Eleanor the heiress. And you, in your infinite arrogance, failed that test spectacularly. You cast her aside, called her weak, told her she did not belong in your world. A cruel, knowing smile touched Arthur's lips. That was your gravest mistake, Vincent. Your fatal error. Vincent's vision blurred. The memory of that night, the cold words he had uttered, the disdain in his voice, played back in his mind. You don't belong in my world. He had seen her tears, the trembling of her hands, the way she had shrunk from his harsh words. He had dismissed it all as weakness, as confirmation of his own superior strength. Now he understood. Those were not tears of weakness, but of profound heartbreak, of a deeply personal betrayal. And the shrinking, that was the calm before the storm, the quiet retreat of a lioness preparing to strike. A wave of nausea washed over him. His world, built on a foundation of ruthless ambition and cold calculation, was not just crumbling. It was being systematically annihilated by the woman he had treated with such contempt. The humiliation was unbearable, a burning fire in his chest. He had prided himself on his intelligence, his foresight, his ability to manipulate and dominate. Yet he had been utterly, profoundly blind. He had seen a mouse and dismissed the dragon. "She is doing this to me," Vincent whispered, the raw horror in his voice barely audible. His hands shook, his knuckles white against the dark wood of the desk. "Eleanor is the one orchestrating my downfall? The woman I married, the woman I—" The word loved caught in his throat, choked by the bitter irony. He had believed he loved her, in his own twisted way, but he had loved his image of her, not the truth. Arthur leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet each word echoed with immense power. "She is a Vance, Vincent. And a Vance never forgets a slight. They never forgive a betrayal of that magnitude. You wounded her deeply, and now you are facing the consequences. You discarded her, believing her to be nothing. Now she reveals herself as everything." He paused, letting the full weight of his words sink in. "She is not just a woman with power, Vincent. She is a woman with a purpose. Your ruin." Vincent felt a primal scream building in his chest, choked off by terror and a dawning, terrifying rage. The anger was directed not just at Eleanor, but at himself, at his own colossal arrogance. How could he have been so foolish? How could he have so utterly misjudged the true nature of the woman sharing his bed, his life? Every dismissive word, every careless slight, every moment of condescension now returned to haunt him, transformed into the instruments of his destruction. He looked around Arthur's study, his gaze landing on an ancient, ornate portrait hanging on the far wall. It depicted a stern-faced man, regal and unyielding, dressed in clothing from a bygone era. His eyes, however, were strikingly familiar, piercing, intelligent, in a deep, unmistakable emerald green. The same vibrant, unforgettable color as Eleanor's eyes. Vincent stared at the portrait, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a picture of absolute, devastating truth. He recognized those eyes. He had seen them in Eleanor every single day. The eyes he had once dismissed as merely beautiful now held the reflection of his coming ruin. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind Vincent Moretti, muffling the distant city sounds. Dust motes danced in the muted light filtering through the tall, leaded glass windows of Arthur Finch's private study, settling on rows of leather-bound books. Vincent's jaw was clenched tight, a knot of frustration pulling at his gut. He had just witnessed Eleanor, his discarded wife, glide through a high society gala like a queen, and then effortlessly snatch a lucrative deal right from under his nose. The memory burned. He paced the rich Persian rug, his expensive Italian loafers sinking slightly with each agitated step. Arthur Finch sat behind his imposing desk, a quiet, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He poured amber liquid into 2 crystal tumblers, the clinking sound unnerving Vincent further. The older man's eyes, deep and knowing, followed Vincent's every restless movement. Vincent could feel the weight of those eyes, assessing him, judging him. "You wanted to see me, Vincent." Arthur's voice was calm, almost a murmur, contrasting sharply with the turmoil raging inside Vincent. He stopped, slamming a fist lightly on the desk, the crystal tumblers rattling. His composure, usually ironclad, was fraying at the edges. The public humiliation, the steady erosion of his power, it was all becoming too much to bear. He needed answers. He needed to understand who dared challenge him in this way. "Who is she, Arthur?" Vincent demanded, his voice low and dangerous. He leaned forward, hands braced on the polished wood. "This new player, this woman who moves like a ghost and strikes like a viper. She appeared from nowhere, and now my deals are crumbling, my alliances are fracturing. My world is being systematically picked apart, piece by piece, and she was there at the gala, orchestrating it all." He paused, searching Arthur's unreadable face. "You know everyone, Arthur. Tell me her name." Arthur took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving Vincent's face. A long moment of silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Vincent's patience was wearing thin, his ambition fueled by a desperate need to reclaim control. He felt a chill creep up his spine. This was not the typical, straightforward conversation he usually had with Arthur, a man who always provided precise, if sometimes unwelcome, counsel. "Her name is Eleanor Vance." "Vincent," Arthur finally said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. He placed his glass carefully on a coaster. "And she is no new player. She is the oldest player." Vincent scoffed, a humorless sound. "Vance, never heard of them. Some upstart syndicate trying to make a name for themselves, no doubt. I'll crush them." He dismissed the name with a wave of his hand, already planning his counterattack, his mind racing through potential strategies to dismantle this unknown threat. He was Vincent Moretti, and no one, especially not some shadowy Vance organization, would stand in his way. Arthur sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "You truly do not see, do you, Vincent? Your arrogance blinds you even now. That woman at the gala, the one who stole your deal, the one who has been unraveling your carefully constructed empire, that was your wife." The words hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. Vincent felt a cold shock, like a bucket of icy water had been thrown over him. His breath caught in his throat. His wife? Impossible. Eleanor was quiet, unassuming, the woman he had dismissed as weak, telling her she did not belong in his world. He remembered her emerald eyes, wide and filled with a pain he had barely registered then. He remembered the simple silver locket, a forgotten symbol of a love he had deemed insignificant. "My wife?" Vincent repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He laughed, a short, sharp bark that held no humor. "Eleanor, that's absurd. She is a docile house cat, Arthur, a fragile ornament. She couldn't organize a tea party, let alone dismantle my operations across 3 continents. You're playing games." His mind rejected the notion, desperately clinging to the image of the submissive woman he had so casually discarded. The thought was too preposterous, too humiliating to be true. Arthur merely raised an eyebrow, his expression unwavering. He leaned back in his chair, a faint scent of aged parchment filling the air. "Did you ever truly see her, Vincent? Or did you only ever see what you wanted to see? A reflection of your own inflated ego, perhaps?" The words were a subtle sting, landing with precision. Vincent felt a flicker of unease, a tiny crack appearing in his hardened facade. The image of Eleanor at the gala, so composed, so powerful, suddenly flooded his mind with terrifying clarity. "Eleanor Vance is the sole heiress to the Vance conglomerate," Arthur continued, his voice now carrying a quiet authority that brooked no argument. "An empire that predates your Moretti family by centuries. An organization so vast, so deeply entrenched, that its true scope is rarely glimpsed by those outside its inner circle. They do not seek fanfare, Vincent. They seek control. Quiet, absolute control." Vincent staggered back, bumping into a heavy leather armchair. He felt a sudden dizziness, the room seeming to tilt around him. The Vance conglomerate. He had heard whispers of it, a myth almost, a name spoken in hushed tones by the oldest, most powerful figures in the underworld. He had always dismissed it as old wives' tales, exaggerations of a bygone era. He, Vincent Moretti, was the future. He was the one building the next great empire. "The Vance family," Arthur elaborated, his voice now a measured history lesson, "has always operated from the shadows. Their influence spans finance, technology, logistics, even governments. Your meager drug routes and protection rackets, Vincent, are child's play compared to their global reach. They own the very infrastructure you operate within, the banks that hold your illicit gains, the ports where your shipments arrive, the communications networks you use to coordinate. The realization hit Vincent like a physical blow. The intercepted shipments, the disrupted communications, the sudden freezing of his offshore accounts, the unexpected legal hurdles that had plagued his recent deals. It all started to make a horrifying kind of sense. He had attributed it to random bad luck, or the machinations of Silas Blackwood. A rival he now understood was merely a pawn in a far grander game. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "She was testing you, Vincent," Arthur stated, his gaze piercing. "She lived a quiet life, sought genuine connection, a love untainted by her power or your ambition. She wanted to see if you could truly love Eleanor, the woman, not Eleanor, the heiress. And you, in your infinite arrogance, failed that test spectacularly. You cast her aside, called her weak, told her she did not belong in your world." A cruel, knowing smile touched Arthur's lips. "That was your gravest mistake, Vincent. Your fatal error." Vincent's vision blurred. The memory of that night, the cold words he had uttered, the disdain in his voice played back in his mind. "You don't belong in my world." He had seen her tears, the trembling of her hands, the way she had shrunk from his harsh words. He had dismissed it all as weakness, as confirmation of his own superior strength. Now he understood. Those were not tears of weakness, but of profound heartbreak, of a deeply personal betrayal. And the shrinking, that was the calm before the storm, the quiet retreat of a lioness preparing to strike. A wave of nausea washed over him. His world, built on a foundation of ruthless ambition and cold calculation, was not just crumbling, it was being systematically annihilated by the woman he had treated with such contempt. The humiliation was unbearable, a burning fire in his chest. He had prided himself on his intelligence, his foresight, his ability to manipulate and dominate. Yet he had been utterly, profoundly blind. He had seen a mouse and dismissed the dragon. "She is doing this to me?" Vincent whispered, the raw horror in his voice barely audible. His hands shook, his knuckles white against the dark wood of the desk. "Eleanor is the one orchestrating my downfall? The woman I married, the woman I—" The word loved caught in his throat, choked by the bitter irony. He had believed he loved her in his own twisted way, but he had loved his image of her, not the truth. Arthur leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet each word echoed with immense power. "She is a Vance, Vincent, and a Vance never forgets a slight. They never forgive a betrayal of that magnitude. You wounded her deeply, and now you are facing the consequences. You discarded her, believing her to be nothing. Now she reveals herself as everything." He paused, letting the full weight of his words sink in. "She is not just a woman with power, Vincent. She is a woman with a purpose. Your ruin." Vincent felt a primal scream building in his chest, choked off by terror and a dawning, terrifying rage. The anger was directed not just at Eleanor, but at himself, at his own colossal arrogance. How could he have been so foolish? How could he have so utterly misjudged the true nature of the woman sharing his bed, his life? Every dismissive word, every careless slight, every moment of condescension now returned to haunt him, transformed into the instruments of his destruction. He looked around Arthur's study, his gaze landing on an ancient, ornate portrait hanging on the far wall. It depicted a stern-faced man, regal and unyielding, dressed in clothing from a bygone era. His eyes, however, were strikingly familiar, piercing, intelligent, in a deep, unmistakable emerald green. The same vibrant, unforgettable color as Eleanor's eyes. Vincent stared at the portrait, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a picture of absolute, devastating truth. He recognized those eyes. He had seen them in Eleanor every single day. The eyes he had once dismissed as merely beautiful now held the reflection of his coming ruin. The green in his eyes was not his own. Vincent stared at the ancient portrait. A cold dread rose as he saw the Vance patriarch possess those same emerald eyes. That gaze, once dismissed as an echo of his wife, now burned the truth into his mind. Eleanor, the woman he cast aside, was the architect of his ruin. A laugh escaped him, for he had built his empire on ruthlessness, undone by the woman he deemed weakest. His world fractured. The empire he built dissolved under Eleanor's calculated precision. He remembered her quiet elegance, her intense gaze. He had dismissed it as adoration, but now he knew it was patient, terrifying observation. Every vulnerability, every dismissive word, she had filed away. His blood pounded. Vincent stumbled from the office. The polished door closed with a definitive click. He walked the corridors of power, now a shrinking cage. His men's faces held uncertainty. His reputation became a liability, for Eleanor, with her quiet strength and ancient legacy, had poisoned his authority. He retreated to his study. The room felt oppressive. He flung a crystal decanter, shattering it against the fireplace. Rage filled him. How dare she play this game? He had loved her in his way. Her concealed power beside him ignited fury, a calculated cruelty and deep betrayal. He slumped into his chair. His hands trembled with need for control. He would not go down. He was Vincent Moretti, and he would make a final stand. He would show her a cornered animal could bite. His mind raced with plans. He had loyalists, and he would mobilize them. Hitting Eleanor directly. He spent hours on calls, his voice hoarse. He ordered captains to gather men, preparing a swift strike against key locations. He would overwhelm her with brute force, an aggression she could not counter. He imagined her calm facade cracking, her eyes widening in fear. This was his world. He clung to this belief. Meanwhile, in the quiet command center, Eleanor sat before glowing screens. Arthur Finch stood nearby. Her posture was regal as she listened to reports of Vincent's frantic movements. She felt cold, methodical clarity. She had known he would react this way. His pride was too immense to surrender. "He is deploying his remaining 25 key units," a calm voice reported through her earpiece, "targeting 4 locations: the old North Docks warehouse, the Financial District Exchange, the Grand Central Distribution Hub, and the city courthouse." Eleanor's eyes flickered across the holographic map. Each location was marked. She had anticipated every move. Her network collected intelligence on his plans. She knew his strategies, and she knew him better than he knew himself. "Neutralize them," Eleanor commanded, her voice clear and precise. "At the North Docks, isolate the command unit and secure the assets. At the Financial District, we route their communications and block their access points. At Grand Central, divert the supply lines and apprehend the transport crews. At the courthouse, intercept their intelligence gatherers before they make contact." Her instructions were surgical. She was excising a cancer. She watched markers on the map converge on Vincent's men. Every Vance unit was synchronized. Within minutes, reports trickled back. North Docks secured, command unit apprehended without resistance, assets accounted for. Then, Financial District communications offline, access points locked down. Followed by Grand Central diversion complete, transport crews detained. And finally, courthouse intelligence neutralized. No contact made. The confrontation was a series of interceptions. Vincent's men, demoralized, found themselves surrounded. His communications went silent. His escape routes vanished. Lieutenants began to defect, choosing survival. Others were apprehended. Vincent, back in his study, stared at his blank comm screen. Chatter ceased. Silence followed static. The reality settled. His final gamble had failed. He was encircled. A distant siren began to wail, growing closer. Then, the rhythmic thump of heavy boots in the hallway. He stood, his hand going to a concealed weapon. But he paused. There was nowhere to run. He was exposed. The study doors swung open. 2 men stood in the doorway. Behind them, Eleanor was silhouetted. Her emerald eyes met his, calm, unwavering. She wore a tailored suit. The Vance family seal gleamed on her finger. Vincent looked at her. He saw not the fragile woman he dismissed, but centuries of power. He saw the vengeance he himself had ignited. His empire lay in ruins, a consequence of his arrogance. He was defeated. His world lay at her feet. The grand chambers of what was once Vincent Moretti's empire now hummed with a different kind of authority. Eleanor walked through the vast, echoing halls, the scent of fresh parchment and new leather mingling with the lingering faint aroma of aged wood and old ambition. Every polished surface reflected her image, sharp and composed, a stark contrast to the shattered woman who had once stood in these very rooms. Her footsteps, once hesitant, now carried a confident, almost imperceptible weight, the sound swallowed by the heavy Persian rugs. Arthur Finch moved at her side, his silver hair a beacon of calm amidst the organized chaos of acquisition. He handed her a financial report, its pages crisp beneath her fingertips. "All assets cataloged, Eleanor," he stated, his voice a low rumble. "The integration is proceeding smoothly, even faster than anticipated. His lieutenants, those who remained, are cooperative." Eleanor nodded, her emerald eyes scanning the columns of numbers, a grim satisfaction settling within her. She saw not just figures, but the tangible dismantling of a world that had once dismissed her. The air in the former war room, now Eleanor's strategic command center, was thick with the scent of strong, dark coffee and the quiet rustle of paper. Maps of the city, once marked with Vincent's territories, now bore new, intricate overlays, detailing the Vance conglomerate's expanded reach. She ran a hand over one such map, tracing the new boundaries. This was not merely about taking what was his, but about reclaiming what was rightfully hers, an inheritance expanded by necessity and refined by vengeance. She had absorbed his world, not destroyed it. His infrastructure, his networks, his carefully cultivated influence, all were now threads woven into her own grand design. She had always known the Vance Empire was vast, but now she felt its true pulse, a living entity that grew and adapted under her touch. The sheer scale of it sometimes felt overwhelming, a heavy cloak draped over her shoulders. Yet she found strength in its weight. The initial burn of betrayal, the sharp tearing pain of being cast aside, had begun to recede, leaving behind a hard, crystalline resolve. She still carried the memory of that raw hurt, a constant reminder of the stakes. It was a scar, not an open wound. One afternoon, sorting through a box of old documents from her loft, she found it, the simple silver locket, tarnished with age. She held its cool metal in her palm, the faint indentation of the Vance family seal still visible on her skin from where it usually rested. Her thumb traced the faint outline of the locket's clasp. For a fleeting moment, the image of a younger Vincent, his eyes filled with a tenderness she had once believed in, flashed before her. The faded photograph inside showed two smiling faces, a ghost of a life that never fully bloomed. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. The love she had offered him, so freely and completely, had been naive, a vulnerability he had mistaken for weakness. Now it was a distant echo, a bittersweet memory that no longer held power over her. She knew she had loved the idea of him, the man she wished he could have been, not the man he truly was. She closed the locket and placed it gently back in the box, a relic of a past that no longer defined her present. Her days were a blur of meetings, strategic planning, and the meticulous process of integrating Vincent's fractured organization. She brought an unexpected order to the cave, quiet efficiency that surprised even Arthur. "You have a natural aptitude for this, Eleanor," he had observed, a rare smile gracing his lips. "More than your father, perhaps. He was a visionary, but you are a builder." She appreciated his words, feeling the truth in them. She was not just about maintaining a legacy, but forging a new path. Eleanor understood that true power lay not in brute force, but in intelligent control, in leveraging influence rather than simply exerting it. She began to implement reforms, quiet changes that promised a new era for the underworld. Less arbitrary violence, more strategic alliances, fairer dealings, stricter codes of conduct. She sought to minimize the collateral damage, the ripples of chaos that often accompanied rivalries. Her approach was less about absolute dominion and more about creating a structured, albeit formidable system. She believed that a stable foundation, even in the shadows, led to more enduring power. The whispers among the network were of the Empress, a figure both feared and respected, whose word was law and whose justice, though swift, was always calculated. One evening, as the city lights began to twinkle against the darkening sky, Eleanor found herself in the highest tower of what was now her consolidated headquarters. The vast expanse of glass offered an unbroken view of the sprawling metropolis below. The air was cool against her skin, and the distant murmur of the city sounded like a collective breath. Arthur joined her, his presence a comforting silence. "Vincent Moretti has been transferred," Arthur said, his voice soft, almost sympathetic, "to a facility far from here. He has nothing left, Eleanor. Not his name, not his money, not his power." Eleanor simply gazed out at the city. She felt no triumphant surge, no giddy joy, only a profound, quiet sense of completion. The debt had been paid. The score had been settled. "And Silas Blackwood?" she asked, her voice steady. "He understands his place now," Arthur replied, a hint of something like approval in his tone. "The message has been received, loud and clear. He has offered his fealty with suitable assurances." Eleanor nodded. She had not sought to destroy every rival, but to establish an undeniable hierarchy. Her reign would be built on strategic dominance, not constant warfare. She had learned from Vincent's mistakes, his arrogance, his short-sighted need for immediate gratification. She thought of the young woman who had married Vincent, eager for love, hoping for a simple, ordinary life. That woman was gone, irrevocably changed by the fire of betrayal and the crucible of power. She was now a culmination of her past, her lineage, and her pain. The emerald eyes that stared out at the glittering cityscape held a wisdom far beyond her years, a silent testament to battles fought and won. Her hand, resting lightly on the cool glass, bore the weight of generations, the legacy of the Vance conglomerate, now indisputably her own. Her revenge was complete, yes, but it had also been a necessary act of self-reclamation. She was not just an heiress, but a queen in her own right, ready to command the future. What would you have done? One line in the comments, Sharon. Let's argue it out together. Where did the story catch you? Which scene made you stop and think? A small like is a small move, but it's a big support for this channel. See you in the next story. Subscribe so you don't miss it.